You're listening to the Today in Manufacturing podcast.
Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Today in Manufacturing podcast. With me this week are Jeff Reinke and Anna Wells. We each have more than 15 years of experience covering the manufacturing industry. Every week, we take the 5 most popular stories on our websites and discuss the implications they have on the industry going forward. Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily newsletter and subscribe to us on YouTube at IEN Magazine so you can join us when we go live every Thursday. Jeff, how you doing this week?
I'm good, David. And you?
I'm great.
Oh, you had to upstage me? I'm good. You have to be great.
Well,
I see how it is. We're starting already.
We are starting already, but I'm great because our colleague Andy Zell had a birthday today, and everyone in his life decided to deliver some sort of sweet treat to him, and I'm just reaping the benefits. Like I don't imagine bringing lunch in for the next 4 to 5 days. Plus, I'm already squirreling some away for the weekend.
Put some in a tree trunk? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, no, I do. It's it's my go cookie bag. Anna, how you doing this week?
I am the best out of everyone.
Oh,
well played.
Anna would.
Yeah.
Anna would. All right. Well, before we get started with our first story this week, we have a word from our sponsor, Big Commerce. And we're back. And just a reminder that Big Commerce provides modern e-commerce technology that works with your existing systems. ERP, OMS, CRM, no problem. Whatever existing business tools and technologies you use today, Big Commerce can integrate using pre-built one-click integrations or customize your automation with its APIs. Make the move to Big Commerce today. Our first story this week. Boeing unveils newest X-plane. On Monday, NASA and Boeing announced the X-66A, a new aircraft produced through NASA's Sustainable Flight Demonstrator project. The X-plane could inform a new generation of more sustainable single-aisle aircraft, the most popular for passenger airlines around the world. Boeing is responsible for building, testing, and flying, and I just got kicked out of my Google Doc. So everyone give me a second before we talk about this amazing Boeing X-plane. And of course I got 90 logins for this thing. Which account is this? All right.
Technology.
That's right. Make your move to Big Commerce today. All right. Our first story continued. So, Boeing is responsible for building, testing, and flying a full-scale demonstrator aircraft with extra-long, thin wings stabilized by diagonal struts, known as a transonic truss-braced wing concept. The X-66A is the first X-plane focused on helping the U.S. achieve net zero aviation greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, which is all a part of the U.S. Aviation Climate Action Plan. The Air Force bestows X-plane status to development programs that set out to create revolutionary experimental aircraft configurations. The designation is for research aircraft specifically. NASA will invest $425 million over 7 years, while Boeing and its partners are going to pitch in about $725 million. With few exceptions, X-planes are intended to test designs and technologies that can be adopted into other aircraft designs, not to serve as prototypes for full production. NASA Administrator Bill Nelson says, quote, "At NASA, our eyes are not just focused on the stars, but also fixated on the sky." Jeff, is NASA going to fix the sky with the X-66A?
That was a beautiful mantra to have. I mean, if you can put that on your business card, you're doing some things right. Okay, so that's cool. Here's the thing. First of all, and I don't want to sound negative, but I'm going to get into some areas where it may seem like it. Okay, the design engineering elements of this program are fantastic. Okay, no arguments. Love what they're doing. We talk about net zero aviation emissions by 2050. The overall goal of this program is to reduce fuel consumption and emissions by like 30%. You know, with a lot of these developments, all very positive. All for it. The one thing that I sometimes get worried about a little bit with NASA, and then you bring in some certain aerospace vendors like Boeing, they really think they can solve a lot of these issues almost exclusively through design engineering. For this one in particular, there's a lot of other things that we also need to be looking at. In particular, there's been a lot of great advancements, and we've sort of debated and talked about them with electronic aircraft in terms of the renewable and using renewable energy sources to power the batteries and keep the planes going that way. We've also talked a lot about sustainable aviation fuels, which I'm a huge advocate of, and we talked about last week. So it's going to be taking a lot of these different tools to make this stuff work. I just don't want us to get pigeonholed into the fact that we can think we can solve all of these problems just with this, even though this transonic truss-based braced wing configuration is incredible, and I love the fact that it can help reduce fewer fuels, because right now, just commercial aviation alone is going through like 1.5 billion barrels of aviation fuel a day. If we can cut that back, that would be a good thing, especially with all the emissions related to it. But it's going to take a community, I guess you could say, to really fix a lot of these problems.
Well, and that's what I like about the X-Planes, is that the entire initiative is for big swings. Like it's not just small incremental developments. Anna, your thoughts on the new X-Plane and some of the impact that it could have potentially for the aerospace industry?
Yeah, I agree, Jeff. It's not a panacea by any means, but I think, they talk about the single aisle aircraft offering such a big payback, which is, I think it's a great place to start, because I think it pointed out that it accounts for 50% of consumer airline emissions come from just the style of plane. So if you can take a 30% bite out of that, that's a really good start, I think. This Bill Nelson, the wordsmith Bill Nelson of NASA, he also said that the X-66A will help shape the future of aviation, a new era where aircraft are greener, cleaner, and quieter, and create new possibilities for the flying public and American industry alike. To me, that's a very exciting prospect. I agree that we have to cover a lot of ground between now and 2050 to get to that goal. That's a huge goal, and it has to come down to power source as well. That is not going to be just this. But if you looked at the Sustainable Flight Demonstrator Project, David talked about it a little bit already, but if you look at it, so it was first announced in January, and according to NASA, its purpose is really to engage with industry, academia, and other government organizations to identify, select, and mature key airframe technologies, such as this new wing design, that have a high probability of transition to the next generation of single-aisle seat-class airliner. So they're really just looking at projects that seem really viable right now, and trying to push those forward as quickly as they can. And I think it's a great way to showcase how NASA isn't just about leaving the Earth's orbit. It's also serving as kind of a linchpin between these private-public partnerships that are so desperately needed when it comes to addressing the needs of consumer airline travel, right? It can't be just a private business thing. It can't be just a government thing. I think NASA's playing a role here as sort of mediating, bringing these parties together to make this happen. So,
yeah, because of the risk, right? Like without the them working together, no one would really kind of go out on a limb by themselves.
Well, and especially Boeing, I mean, look at all that they have going on, and they have stuff that's really profitable now as is, and they need those profits, right? So it is a hard time for them to be taking a risk as it comes to development here, and with NASA ponying up a bunch of money as well, and bringing in these sort of academic stakeholders to help kind of bring the whole thing together is really important. So, they're saying that the results of the flight tests will help inform industry decisions as to the design of new production single-aisle aircraft for the 2030s. They're hoping to fly it by 2028. And so I don't know, Jeff. I mean, to me, it feels like NASA's calling this the thing that leads to the thing, really. I mean, they're taking this as a vehicle and trying to move some of these technologies forward. So that's exciting.
And can we at least agree? I know that when people see words like greener and cleaner,
Mm-hmm.
there's immediate pushback, right? Just like, oh, what do you really mean? But I mean, can we at least agree that quieter is better when it comes to anything aviation related?
How nice would that be, huh?
I mean, if you've ever flown, lived near an airport, it's just like we can all agree that they could get quite a bit quieter and it would be all right in terms of noise pollution.
But like you as a passenger, the alternative is that you just hear other people more.
I mean, no, because I mean, those headphones are on either way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, yeah, that's,
that can't happen.
I mean, every once in a while, like depending on the person that sits next to me, I might take the headphones out and just like give it a shot. Just like, hey, so what do you do? I mean, just because.
Do you say it like that?
Yeah.
Because that's probably not going to work a lot.
Hey.
And when it does work, you probably don't want it to.
No, it's great. Like, I like my awkward introductions to really lead me down a, like various paths. Just like, what are you doing this evening? Just like, what do you mean? Like, hey, we're stuck here for at least 2.5 hours till we get to Vegas. Let's talk about it.
Do you see anything you like in Sky Mall?
I miss Sky Mall. There's so many times I almost bit on that life-size Sasquatch statue and just never took the leap.
David, how many times have people hit the flight attendant button after you asked them how they were doing?
Never. They're always just like, you know what? Looks like a stand-up guy. Let's talk about it, and let's do this little image search game on Delta Airlines together. I'm like,
wow.
Yeah.
No, they're like,
Building
any
partnerships.
extra seats on this plane, even by the bathroom, would be fine.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I move back there?
In the bathroom is fine.
I'm going to I got to go again. I'm sorry. You know, I had a lot of water. Due to their heavy usage, these aircraft account for like, what was it we were saying, nearly half of worldwide aviation emissions. So they could make a substantial impact. In this epically named transonic truss-braced wing configuration, it's not just the standalone, they're going to work on this wing configuration and then it's going to be an immediate fix, Jeff. So they're hoping to combine it with advancements in propulsion systems, materials, new systems architecture, and just that will make that 30% less fuel consumption and emissions from current standards. So, they're not just saying like, let's try these wings out and nothing else. They put a lot of eggs in the basket.
I get all that. I'm just saying if they really want to get to zero, it's going to be more than just design engineering. There's going to have to be some focus on fuel and power too.
Agreed, but wouldn't you say like right now more than any other time in our lives, it seems like there is a collective push forward for that?
I think some of it's forced, but yes, there's definitely momentum forward. I would agree. I think there's resistance along the way, but I think it is an overall recognition of we have these technologies that can make things better. Let's use them. And then when you bring in the financial incentive of potentially using less fuel and improving your cost ratio, that's what gets people fired up without a doubt.
This X-plane history for NASA in particular dates back to the 1940s, before it was even NASA, when it was called the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, or NACA. It just doesn't have the same ring to it. Just like no, I mean, I'd be a way different fanfare. Oh man, who's watching us live? Cyrus? Well, Cyrus, how you doing? That is a great hat you're wearing, sporting the Today in Manufacturing hat.
Absolutely.
As people are wearing our merch, or soon drinking out of our merch when we get those koozies in.
Don't spoil it,
I'm
David.
not spoiling it. I'm just saying, like, I want to see those
You're gonna
photos.
wreck the unveiling.
So many boat photos.
Wrecked. Yeah.
Anyway.
We just can't have nice things, can we, David?
No. Everyone knows I'm going to ruin it.
Oh, okay.
Just like I ruined the intro to this first story. Our next most popular story, pending whether or not my computer crashes while we're live. Bugatti is recalling one car. Luxury automaker Bugatti recently recalled a single 2023 Chiron Supersport because it had the wrong wheels. The vehicle was sporting a set of Leichtbarad BBS rims, which the Chiron Supersport is not validated for. The mistake once again comes down to a software failure. During the final individualization configuration, a step prior to production, there was no restriction in the company's IT system that would invalidate the use of these rims. Well, the wheel mix-up could result in a loss of downforce and a loss of control, but only if you're in, quote, top speed mode. To achieve this particular mode, the driver needs to use a second key that is inserted prior to starting the vehicle. With it, the car can reach 260 miles per hour, which is amazing. Production for the Chiron Supersport is extremely limited, likely because the car costs $4 million. I mean, Anna, first of all, this might be the best use for the you had one job. But also, is the second key like the original form of like double authentication? I had never heard of that before.
Yeah, it definitely is. Do you think that this person who had their vehicle recalled got that postcard in the mail?
Yeah, just like it was accidentally filed away with other junk mail from like realtors and landscapers. And they're like, I don't need this. Time to go cruising in top speed mode.
Yeah, they're like, we have not been able to get a hold of the person.
I feel like anything you get from Bugatti stands out.
Yeah.
I don't think it looks like a mailer.
It comes in like a solid gold like box.
Yeah, I think that.
That's the best way to get a recall.
So not the postcard. Okay.
No.
So recalling one car is so ridiculous, but it's actually weirdly more common than you might think. As Motor One points out in a recent article in April, Land Rover recalled one Range Rover in the U.S. because the SUV's engine could have leaked oil onto the exhaust manifold and caused a fire.
Yeah.
That happened.
It's a good reason to recall it.
It is. Mercedes last December had to recall a lone 2022 S-Class for an insufficiently attached dashboard. Not sure how you figured that out.
It fell into your lap.
After the fact. Yeah.
Somebody took the screws home. Like, oh,
yeah.
man. Look what I forgot to leave at work.
Like when you have the extra screw in your pocket after you put together furniture and you're just like, oh no.
Well, yeah. And then it's like, so how come only the one then? You know for sure?
Yeah.
How do you know for sure? Anyway, but what these cars tend to have in common is that they're very small run productions, especially this Bugatti, right? They're like hardly any of these were made. I think it sheds some light on the fact that when you're dealing with small production runs, you might actually open yourself up to some quality issues simply because these are built to order. And there's been some research that's been conducted that suggests that BTO in automotive, which is becoming more popular with consumers for obvious reasons, produces some inherent challenges for automakers, chiefly consumer expectations as to how quickly those cars can and should be turned around.
Yeah.
And I think it puts some pressure on the supply chains as well, and of course the OEMs who are working on a compressed timeline and perhaps trying to get these out faster than they should.
Wait, so people who are getting a one-of-a-kind original car are like demanded as soon as possible?
Well, think about it this way, David. It's not necessarily this like Bugatti where they're making like 15
Oh, you're
of
just
these.
saying all...
There's a lot more of this happening, customizing happening in automotive.
Okay.
And so people are used to getting cars within a certain time period, and so then they're thinking, I need to get this, you know.
I want to drive it off the lot.
Yeah, exactly. So I think this is a unique case, right? Because it was such a small volume. It sounds like they pinpointed the problem already, as you pointed out, the IT system, which actually, I read in another article, actually let the customer make that designation.
Oh, made the choice. Okay.
And so obviously they've identified a preventive measure here that blocks them from doing so. But again, I think the challenges of BTO are reflected in these other recalls of single units. And what's interesting is that we're in an increasingly BTO type of society now, where consumers, I think they want products that are customized to their needs. And yet some automakers are actually moving away from that concept. We've seen more of that lately too. They're trying to standardize many components, making it quicker to move from a platform to a finished product. And then, you know, some of the specific trim components, as we've discussed already, are going to be like sort of an on-demand or after the fact, something that you pay for. So obviously I've expressed my distaste in the past over that model. But you know, perhaps, even though I still don't like it, perhaps companies can realize some benefits in terms of consistency and quality, as well as faster time to market if they're going to operate that way. Of course, these types of changes will never be a reality for Bugatti. Yeah. But at least they sounds like they have a fix here, right? They figured out what happened right away.
Yeah. The really expensive rims needed to be fixed on the very expensive car.
Right, yep.
That requires 2 keys to put in a very expensive mode.
I think you should need an extra key if you're going to go 260 miles an hour.
It's great.
There definitely needs to be another precaution in place.
It's not
the
just
third
like
key.
It's not just like a red button like in Fast and Furious.
You should need somebody else to also turn a key simultaneously, like straight out of Hunt for Red October.
Yeah,
or
right. Like your wife has to have the key around her neck, just like, all right, only if you do it on the track.
Right.
Jeff, Joe, who's watching us live, says he's excited for a koozie. Jesse says it's time to approve the artwork, Jeff.
Approved.
There it is. Live approval. We hope they're delivered by the time this podcast is over, Jesse. FedEx that. Jeff, I mean, this is obviously a unique issue, but it was important to note that like the customer is going to get a free set of rims as a result, brand new tires, valves, and sensors. And at first I'm like, okay, they're buying a $4 million car. What's the big deal? These rims can cost up to like $10,000 each.
Yeah, I mean, it's a $4 million car, right? I mean, these aren't just something you're going down to AutoZone and picking up, right?
I mean, I understand that, but like, I just think, on the RAV, when a tire sensor goes bad, it's like, oh man, there's $1,500. But like, when you have a $4 million car, are you a little bit? I guess you got the kind of money where you get the light that pops up, and you're just like, I mean,
there's
the
no
principle.
light. Somebody is calling you.
Someone's calling you?
I mean, there's no light popping up on the dashboard.
You have a tire.
Are you kidding me?
Well, I mean, if it's a tire sensor, like, I mean, I don't know what the kind of customer service Bugatti has. They call you and you get the same gold box, like with a new tire sensor.
Somebody's probably at your door. Okay, look, this is something we can't relate to on a personal level in terms of having a $4 million vehicle and custom built and all that. But I do think it's an interesting case study just in terms of how Bugatti responded. Okay, This is a company, now you can make fun of or sort of make light of the fact that it's tires on a $4 million car. This is one of 80 vehicles that this company produced. Okay, so even though I can appreciate it's to scale, but it's not apples to apples type of thing. This would be the equivalent of Ford issuing a recall for 50,000 vehicles. Okay,
Yeah.
if you look at production numbers. Now, we've seen U.S. automakers really struggle to go after some of what we would consider minor flaws that can have bigger impacts. Okay, so I do think it's an interesting case study how you've got a company who has a reputation and has a business model that says we're going to be premium, we're going to be through every step of the way, we're going to treat our customers in a certain way, and as a result, we can demand a certain price. Well, they're following through on that promise, so to speak, that they've made to that customer in terms of paying attention to every single detail. I think it would be interesting if we took this same type of dynamic to a larger automaker, and again, they knew it affected a small portion. This is 1.25% of Bugatti's output.
Yeah.
Would Ford have reacted the same way? Would GM have reacted the same way? Toyota, whoever you want to say, if it was, again, 50,000 vehicles. We see these huge recalls that affect hundreds of thousands of vehicles, and they got to worry about lawsuits and everything else. Well, I think, again, it sets a good example of how to react to these situations in preserving your customer satisfaction, keeping them coming back. If the guy bought one $4 million vehicle, you probably want him to do it again, so you take care of him. But the same applies to any other business as well.
Agree. Yeah.
Well, I mean, just last week we were talking about, was it the Bronco? It was only 175,000 that had a bad seatbelt position in a very specific position. And yeah, it took the NHTSA like kind of really pushing things forward in order for Ford to be like, all right, we'll put a barrette clip on it or whatever. Yeah. I thought it was another reminder of just, another software problem having like a crazy impact on a particular project, and the complications and struggles of like getting any sort of software integration right from any enterprise. It's, this is something that was likely an oversight, especially if it was also customer facing. It's integrating new software is incredibly difficult, and making sure you debug that thing. I know that it seems like a really tedious, painstaking problem, but we've seen like a building partially collapse as a result of a software problem. We've seen, this major recall on a $4 million car. It's just, it can be anywhere in the industry. And I think it just means like, it's a good reminder to do your due diligence when you're vetting new software, the provider, and you're integrating it into your business. Yeah.
Well, and the scary thing here too is that it was a double problem, because not only was the customer allowed to spec it that way, but then the people building it, they put those on. They were not aware that they couldn't do that, right? So,
Yeah, no, it was just, on the bill of materials, like, okay, we put these rims on. And there should have been some sort of red flag. All right, well, our next most popular story. Toyota is pursuing an EV battery with a 900-mile range. Toyota recently held an event at an R&D hub in Japan that included a number of new announcements, including software that automatically updates itself, aerospace-inspired vehicle designs, and cars that drive themselves through the assembly process. What got everyone's attention was a potential battery that could travel up to 900 miles, more than the distance from New York to Chicago on a single charge. At the event, company officials shared a roadmap of more than double the current range of its liquid-state batteries between 26 and 28, before rolling out 2 solid-state batteries toward the end of the decade. The first, in 2027 and 2028, would reportedly be able to travel 745 miles per charge, while the subsequent, more advanced version would be able to reach 932 miles on a charge, all while recharging in minutes. Anna, yes, this is goodbye range anxiety, but does this really kick the can for prospective buyers?
It may, if I think there's been a lot of hesitation on behalf of buyers as they wait out new technology that's in development now. You don't want to get it was only a few short years ago that these batteries were like 150 mile batteries, and now they're over 300, and the prospect of 900. Whoa.
Yeah, no, it was, I felt
leap.
the same. Like, I'm reading the story, and I feel like I've gone through the exact same process, right? Like 150, no. 300 plus, I'm like, okay, I can make that work for my daily commute or whatever. And then you hear 900, and you're like, I could wait till 27.
I can already envision the blowback from the convenience store lobby, like Quick Trip's calling their legislators right now angrily, like trying to get this thing taxed to hell. Don't you think?
Yeah, tax it into oblivion, so it can't exist.
Can we make people go to the bathroom more? How do we get around this? No, I do think there's a lot of questions you need to ask. From my humble consumer perspective, this is incredibly exciting, right? Toyota, who was lagging behind their competitors really all the way through this. They were like first on the scene with a hybrid electric, and then when it came to full on EVs, they're really not there yet. To do something that's way above and beyond what its competitors are doing, essentially raising the bar significantly on range, that's very exciting. I think perhaps the biggest unknown at this point is how much is this going to cost, and will consumers pay a potentially big premium on the reassurance that they can travel with this thing for long periods of time and not worry about charging? The second question is it worth a premium once the public charging infrastructure that's being funded now and developed now is really rolled out, and maybe there is no range anxiety anymore?
Yeah.
If this battery costs a lot more, then that's going to just, muddy the waters, I think, on that decision, maybe.
Agreed.
And then finally, Toyota's saying that there is no increased fire risk with this battery. They're saying that it's actually less of a risk with this battery, but we have almost no detail on the battery. So, because in my mind, of course, it goes to how cool would it be to drive for 900 miles? But a 900 mile internal combustion engine, like a 900 mile gas tank. Could you imagine how terrifying that would be? Like how the tremendous risk that would be of fire or explosion if you got into a wreck and you had all that gas.
Just a trailer full of gas that you pull behind your car.
It would be, right? What's the risk with stored electrical energy in this case? Obviously, they seem to have some things cooking if they're already saying the risk is going to be lower for fire. But I would like to know more about that and how that's being achieved. So again, I'm excited about this. It's a cool prospect. If this is the way this is going, this is tremendously exciting. I think it's another it would be another big win in the column for EVs if you could truly drive from New York to Chicago and not have to stop to refuel. That's exciting.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of questions I would like to hear answered first about this specific battery.
And I think it shines a little light. many times we've talked about Toyota really lagging when it came to EVs.
Right.
And really it just looks like maybe they were waiting to show their hand a little bit until they were maybe a little more confident in the technology.
Yeah.
Jeff, the sales model for automotive is evolving, right? Seemingly towards this reliance on subscription services. My curiosity is, what if they adopted sort of a grow with you model that we have seen some machine manufacturers have, right? So like the idea is that you buy into the equipment early, and as the business scales, they will buy back the equipment essentially, so that way, I mean, I'm just saying, like, if we're thinking outside of the box when it comes to the evolution of automotive, is that possible?
Well, there's a couple things. First of all, I'll be a little bit of a wet blanket on this story. I'll preface that right away. So as far as your rightfully so.
I mean,
that's my role.
I mean,
all right, I'll embrace it. I'll roll with it. So first of all, you're first in looking at that modular approach in terms of taking out a battery and putting a new one in, essentially. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I mean, under current constraints, when we look at the engineering now, that would take a lot of time and be extremely expensive.
Yeah, or not even the battery. What if it was just switching out
you're swapping out vehicles?
Get another car, yeah.
That would almost make more sense, quite honestly, when you look at the time and resources involved with that. Mm-hmm. I mean, that isn't that far-fetched, in my opinion, if they can really follow through.
Yeah.
I mean, they're looking right now at basically tripling the range of what everybody else is doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Lucid is at the high end, and they're at just over 500 miles on their range, okay? Mm-hmm. And that's an $80,000, $90,000 base model vehicle,
yeah.
Okay? So that's not for everybody. Yeah. That's not what Toyota does, okay?
Yeah.
So when they look at those ranges and how quickly they say they think they can roll them out, I am very pessimistic in terms of that actually happening. I think a lot of this stems from the fact that they just made some huge investments in terms of infrastructure and manufacturing facilities here in the U.S. in particular, in Kentucky and in North Carolina. They've also been under a lot of pressure, and we ran some articles around about this week about stockholders.
Yeah.
Basically saying, what are you doing here? You're going too slow. You need to do something to pump up your EV model because we're losing market share. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of this could be in response to that, as opposed to saying, yeah, we've got this roadmap, because as Anna alluded to, there is no specifics in terms of the composition of these batteries.
Yeah.
And to make these types of leaps within the next 3 to 4 years, man, I personally, like I said, I'm very pessimistic on their ability to do that. It would be amazing if they could, because they'll bring everybody along with them. They'll pull everyone else up to meet those ranges. But I would be concerned from a cost perspective, what they would do to do it too quickly. Mm-hmm. There would definitely be, I don't know how they can say it's safer. And when it's got that much more juice flying through it, at a minimum, there's still going to be the same sort of issues or precautions you need to take from a safety perspective. The other thing that was kind of interesting, or a couple things. Well, number one, Toyota's really been at the forefront in terms of hydrogen. We ran some stuff talking about how they were doing some racing actually with hydrogen-powered vehicles. They've been touting that as something that they've really been investing in. And really that movement is gaining a lot of steam, a lot of speed. A lot of people are embracing the potential of hydrogen as an alternative fuel source, even beyond batteries.
Yeah.
Now, when we get back to batteries again, this $2.1 billion plant that they're looking to put up in North Carolina, they're saying it's a lithium-ion battery production facility. Mm-hmm. Talk about lithium ions, you're talking about rare earths, okay? Yeah. And there's still huge supply chain issues there. The one advantage Toyota may have is being a Japanese company, they do have very good trade relations with China, which is where a lot of that stuff is right now. Right now, Japan as a country is bringing about 60% of their rare earths directly from China. So there's a good relationship there. So I don't know how that would work. If a Japanese company buys something from China, it's in Japan, and then they try to bring it to the U.S., you'd think that would get convoluted as well.
Yeah.
Especially when we look at some of the rebates and some of the other things associated with electric vehicles right now that are a purchasing incentive. So there's a lot to unwrap here that you kind of have to take a wait-and-see approach to. I want to be optimistic, but still, that timeline seems super aggressive for tripling the range potential of an EV battery. I don't know.
I mean, this entire announcement, and Seth, is all on board. He says everybody loves a good wet blanket. So
thanks, Seth.
Seth's on board.
Who loves a good wet blanket?
Pro wet blanket. I'm trying to think of a
positive application of a wet blanket.
Yeah. Other than you're on fire.
It's a good time to use it.
When you're on fire in a runaway battery situation. No, okay.
So that's what I'm really trying to do. Use that analogy because, it's the studio. We've talked about the issues we have in here from a temperature control perspective.
Ugh.
Yeah.
the wet blanket is there to help.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jeff.
I like it.
Yeah,
I like it.
Started going with that. I didn't like where it was going.
Well, I mean, I think there are some similarities to this story and then the announcement with NASA and Boeing in terms of the X-plane, because this is kind of like an X-plane equivalent to EVs, right? Where they just say like, hey, this is what we're going for. This is what we're going to try. And other than that, we're not really certain how we're doing it, you know? So it's kind of like, you know, a tease, you know?
At least with Boeing, they're saying, though, and with NASA as well, they're saying this is the design we're going to focus on. We've got some method to our madness a little bit. Toyota's basically kind of just throwing out numbers here.
Yeah, but they're not stupid. They're a publicly traded company. They can't just throw out like, we're working on something and we'll figure it out later type projections. I mean, this is like, this is a publicly traded company. Like that's in violation of SEC guidelines. Like they have to have something happening here. I agree with you. And I said the same. There's a lot that we need to know about this battery that they're not sharing yet. But I don't think that they're just like, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? Just say something, say something.
Triple the range.
Yeah.
Triple the range. Well, I mean, among the other things that they kind of talked about that were sort of overlooked, one was the cars driving themselves through the factory, right? And the production overhaul that the company's talking about. As part of Toyota's production overhaul, factory engineers already plan to introduce new manufacturing techniques for the 2026 EVs that cut the number of production processes in half, which could make a tremendous impact in production overall for the company in terms of cost savings. When it also comes to cost savings, according to Automotive News, one of the new techniques is called gigacasting, which is going to eliminate the number of parts by essentially casting the front of the vehicle and the back of the vehicle as two big modules. So just really cutting down on a serious number of components. And like, I mean, the extended range is one thing, and that's, that by the end of the decade, but this we're talking about 3 years, like some pretty significant cuts to production. And maybe if you're spending so much more on the battery, maybe if the savings is there, maybe it's not a $90,000 car. I don't know. One of the other things that was interesting to me was the idea of cars driving themselves through the factory. Toyota calls this self-propelled production. And for me at first, I thought it was like a futuristic, man, this is pretty cool. I was actually thinking of that Lingato facility we talked about a couple of weeks ago, like this car driving itself through the like 6 layers of production.
Yeah.
But I mean, Toyota's already using this at a Motomachi assembly facility where the BZ4X drives itself from final assembly to final inspection, and it's all remote controlled. And the idea is that basically the car will do this from the beginning of production, as you know, once the wheels are on, through the end of production. And I think that's kind of interesting as well.
Look, there's a reason why there's the Toyota production system, right? They are literally a pioneer in terms of manufacturing efficiencies. I don't doubt their ability there in any way.
Yeah. I mean, cutting half of production out, that's cost savings.
A little bit.
Yeah. All right. Our next most popular story. Biden-Harris administration announces $192 million to advance battery recycling technology. The U.S. Department of Energy this week announced more than $192 million in new funding to be used for recycling consumer product batteries and launching an advanced battery R&D consortium. Some $125 million will go towards consumer electronics battery recycling, reprocessing, and battery collection to develop campaigns to get more consumers participating in existing battery recycling programs, improve the economics of recycling consumer electronics batteries, help local governments create or improve programs, and help retailers collect, sort, store, and transport consumer electronic batteries. The consumer battery recycling portion of this was a key part of the $7 billion bipartisan infrastructure law to grow and secure America's battery supply chain. The Advanced Battery R&D Consortium funding opportunity is going to provide $60 million to convene major EV manufacturers in the U.S., universities, national labs, mineral and material suppliers, and other key battery stakeholders to address critical battery needs for the next phase of wide-scale EV commercialization. The consortium should advance battery R&D that is relevant and responsive to the needs of EV manufacturers and to further develop a domestic battery supply chain and recycling capabilities that are essential to meeting the rapidly growing demand for EV batteries. And I kind of want to break this into two parts because one, the consumer electronics portion of this, a lot of that read to me like, man, we have some of these things that are working and just nobody knows about them and nobody's using them. So here's 125 million to like get the word out. And then like the other 60 million, which I thought actually stood to like make a larger impact because it talks about getting industry stakeholders together and making some real change when it comes to the battery supply chain.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's a lot of really good pieces to this. I'm always pleased to see an effort to approach recycling continuity and improvement. I think for so many years, businesses and consumers alike have looked at recycling as a problem that's solved. Like as long as you put your waste in the right container, your actions had no impact. We know that's not the case. That is just a small fraction of what we consume and even what we put in the recycle bin is being repurposed in any way at this point. And of course, there's an environmental cost to the pickup, the processing, all those related activities. I think as we go forth into this world where electronics have such a massive role in our lives and in our businesses, to the point where we're on the cusp of taking fossil fuels out of automotive, we have to plan for these batteries, besides dumping them in a landfill where they can contaminate the soil and the water. Not to mention that there is a real need to repurpose these materials that are expensive and very hard to source. The research components, the collection funding for local governments and retailers, those could have huge impacts. I think the behavior change campaigns in here are also really important too. To your point, there's already electronics recycling in many communities. There's like a page in the phone book about it. Like you really have to hunt down that information to find it out. Yeah. I think a lot of people just don't know where to go, what to do, so they don't, you know? And, you know, there's a lot of, there was a lot of rhetoric around plastic recycling, which has, I think at this point, essentially amounted to greenwashing, in my opinion, where certain industries were sort of pushing this narrative that you could consume limitless amounts as long as that package or that component inside was quote unquote recyclable. It's time to get real about that and make this like an actual practical choice that people can make to recycle and to really recycle. And with batteries, there's a lot of value in the reusability of those materials. I think it's different than trying to suck out something useful from plastic number 7, which is like, you know what I mean? Yeah. This is really viable. And to me, this is the kind of recycling program that does deserve government support, because this is the kind of stuff that not only has a huge payback for the environment, but also a huge payback for the supply chain, for the availability of some of these materials that we really need, especially ongoing into the EV age.
Agreed. And Jeff, maybe it's because we do too many stories about government funding abuse that sometimes now when I look at these stories and I see those numbers and then I see things like, you know, we all got to work together and figure something out. I'm just like, oh, I don't know, that's a lot of money to just try. You know, just kind of float, go out on a flyer. But I don't know, maybe that's just like coming out of the COVID-19 funding fraud where there was like a story a week, if not more.
Who's the wet blanket now?
I mean, I'm like...
Well, David's just anti-recycling.
I guess.
Very anti-recycling. I mean, and I'm not wet. I'm more of like a soggy towel than a wet blanket.
It's weird.
Yeah, that sounded so much worse.
Yeah, no, it's...
soggy, that just sounds gross.
Yeah, no, it's like, because... Well, I don't know. There's just something about biting a soggy towel that just is weird on your teeth.
Why are you biting?
No.
Did you see Ann and I go at the exact same time? Why is he... What?
I don't know. I just wanted to go away right just to see what you guys would do, and it works perfectly. Yeah, no, it kind of tastes like metal. But, I mean, so while there are some good things with this program,
can't wait for this segue here to...
Yeah.
No, you know, what are ways that this program can prove to be useful and not a wet blanket for government spending?
I'll try to follow that. So the things, and I'm as critical of governments, especially the Biden administration and their funding levels as anybody. But what I will say about this, the two bullet points that kind of stood out to me as to why this could be successful, and I was really happy to see some of this going on, is when they talk about improving the economics of recycling consumer electronics batteries to spur greater market demand for battery recycling. Okay. We live in an urban area where, again, as Anna alluded to, you can figure out where to take this stuff, okay? I had a bunch of miscellaneous electric cords and fans and other weird stuff. I could go right to the Middleton Recycling Center. They had a shelf for everything. It's very clear cut. Rural areas don't have those same resources.
Right.
And that stuff, yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's where it ends up, and that's the issue. That's the problem. So if we can, and I think back to when I was a kid, you'd recycle cans, right? You crushed cans and you took them to the recycling center, you took them to the machine, you dumped them in there, you got a couple bucks out. Hey, good day, right? And you were excited about doing something. And that was before we had the bins and everything else. So there's an economic stimulus that helped create basically a process for doing that, get people on board with it. It created a different way of going about getting rid of this stuff that people just embraced. And I think putting something like that in place and having that part of this guidance is a very positive thing because it understands you need to change behaviors. That's the word I was looking for. The other one was assisting states and local governments in establishing or enhancing battery collection, recycling, and I think most importantly, reprocessing programs. This is a big deal because you can say to states, hey, recycle. And they'll do exactly like the example I just gave. Middleton's got this big, beautiful facility for everybody to take stuff to. But then what does the city of Middleton do with it? Okay, that's the second part of it. A couple months ago, I actually did an interview with a company based out of Nevada called Aqua Metals. Now, they're focused on EV battery recycling specifically. But we got talking about a lot of other things. You can actually find the interview on our partner site, ThomasNet. And his big thing was, number one, we don't have a lot of EV batteries right now, so they're still being used, but we're developing processes. The other thing he said was, with a lot of these consumer electronics batteries that we can recycle, right now it's costing people $10 or $20 to get rid of some of this stuff. And the reality is inside a lot of those components or cord sets or whatever you want to say, there's thousands of dollars worth of materials that can be repurposed. So we need to get people to understand that there is a lot that's not just thrown away because the cord came off the power supply. We need to recycle that just to keep the supply chain in better economic shape. Yeah. The other thing too, he said when they were developing their process for recycling these batteries is if they did it and it required a ton of energy and it emitted a ton of emissions and you're basically just exchanging one bad thing for another, what's the point? Yeah. So when they talk about reprocessing programs, that is vital. Number one, we're going to incentivize people. We're going to show them there's a reward, if you will, for adjusting their behaviors and recycling this stuff. But then once we get it, we know how to effectively process it to get the good stuff out and get rid of the bad stuff in an environmentally friendly manner. Yeah. I think those two things are really the backbone for making this work.
No, that's a good point. One thing that stood out to me about the consortium is that hopefully it can come to an understanding, whatever it winds up being. Because it seems like when they use language like R&D that is relevant and responsive to the needs of EV manufacturers, it just seems like really subjective because what's relevant and responsive to one manufacturer, the other one might not care about or need. It might not be valuable. But we have seen, is it just me or does it seem like we have just seen an uptick when it comes to government funding projects recently? So the Biden-Harris administration just today announced another $135 million to reduce emissions across the industrial sector in America. That includes 40 projects across 21 states, projects for chemical manufacturers, iron and steel, food and beverage, cement and concrete, and the paper product industry. And there was another program that came out through the Manufacturing Extension Partnership Program, which is a NIST program. And if anyone doesn't know about it, look it up because these MEPs do amazing work. Basically, this program last week awarded roughly $400,000 to each MEP in every state and Puerto Rico. The more than $20 million in total funding is going to be used to develop programs to make domestic supply chains more resilient and efficient. So I didn't know if it was just a hot week when it came to government funding or a hot week when it came to government funding specifically to the industrial sector. But it looks like there's a lot of money floating around out there that, sometimes isn't used because people don't know what's available. So if these programs seem to touch your business in any way, look into what it might take to apply for some of this funding. you know?
I mean, that's definitely, the MEPs do a great job of promoting those available funds, though. I think that they're definitely an unsung hero in terms of distributing those funds and getting it out there for a lot of these programs. I think some of this could just be the result of some of the political activities that have been taking place right now in terms of budgeting and all of that.
Yeah.
There's obviously some promises that the Biden administration might be needing to fulfill right now.
Okay.
So I think there is some political element to it. But if the end result is positive, I don't really care.
Yeah.
Well, and consider too that they have a green objective that's like part of the administration's goal, and the industrial sector is really at the heart of that because we can make some big changes here that have a lot of impact. So I think it's hitting us close to home where we, right in our backyard. But
well, and supply chain is also tied to infrastructure, and that was a big part of that bill that was passed earlier this year. I mean, it was focused on semiconductors and everything else, but there was also an infrastructure element to it. This plays a role.
All right. Our most popular story this week. CEO traffics hundreds of millions of dollars of fake Cisco equipment. Honor Aksoy is the CEO of dozens of companies, but now he's facing up to 6.5 years in prison after pleading guilty to trafficking counterfeit and fraudulent Cisco networking equipment to customers that included government agencies and the military. Aksoy, who lives in Florida, oversaw at least 19 companies, and the DOJ has a list of these, so go check out the vendors because 15 of them were Amazon storefronts and at least 10 were eBay storefronts. So if you've had any issues with Cisco equipment, check the receipts. Collectively called Pro Network Entities, his company imported tens of thousands of modified, low-quality computer networking devices from China and Hong Kong. The products came with Cisco stickers, labels, boxes, packaging, and even fake trademarks registered and owned by Cisco. According to the DOJ, the devices had an approximate total retail value of hundreds of millions of dollars. Aksoy's co-conspirators modified old, lower-model products to appear as new and genuine devices. Modifications included pirated software and components, all that circumvented measures designed to authenticate the hardware and check for license or software license compliance. The products would often fail, malfunction, and sometimes cost users tens of thousands of dollars in the field. Between 2014 and 2022, Customs and Border Protection seized about 180 shipments of counterfeit Cisco devices and sent a notice. Aksoy submitted some fake paperwork and then essentially broke his shipments up into smaller parcels to kind of get around everything. After Cisco sent 7 cease and desist letters to Aksoy, he responded with more forged documents. A recent search of his warehouse seized 1,156 counterfeit Cisco devices worth more than $7 million in retail value. Aksoy must forfeit $15 million and make full restitution to the victims, if they can find the money. Jeff, sometimes when these, like almost decade-long schemes get unraveled, it is amazing how far-reaching they are and how sophisticated they were.
Yeah. And one of the things that always gets me is what the penalty ends up being.
Yeah.
4.5 to 6 years or 4 to 6.5 years in jail. It just seems for the potential damage. I mean, we're talking about networking equipment.
Yeah.
Small businesses network goes down. That's downtime on the plant floor. We know how much that costs.
Yeah, and so we know what that is in terms of value, but I mean, when it comes to full restitution to victims, I think that means like what they paid for the equipment, not the fact that it shut their facility down.
And now $15 million, okay, like financially, okay, I'm all right there. And I don't know what the right penalty is.
Yeah.
Because I don't want him to go to prison for that long and pay for him to, I don't know, get a college degree or something. I don't know what the right subject or right way to penalize or punish these individuals are, but it always seems way too light.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's frustrating in that respect. The other thing is that got me is Cisco knew this was going on.
Yeah.
Like countless times.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't they dig into it more? Why wouldn't they look at it more? I mean, this is just basically breaking their brand and giving them a crappy reputation all along. Plus, you've got this guy who you would never want representing your company in any way, shape, or form, continuing to do it. Now, one of the reasons is because, I mean, Cisco's a $50 billion company. $100 million in products probably doesn't register.
Yeah.
But what they need to understand and what Amazon needs to understand is these stories do get into the mainstream. And when people start looking at this, it's not just what this guy did that gets their attention. It's, man, Cisco and Amazon were kind of in on this because they knew what was going on and they didn't shut them down. That impacts their brand too. And they could have been more involved in shutting this down sooner. They didn't because they probably didn't see an immediate return on it. But the longer term ramifications are there, and it pays to get involved in what would comparatively be maybe a smaller counterfeiting issue because the long-term issues are going to be there for the long term. So
see, I figured you would take more of an angle up because it seems to me, I read that like Cisco kind of exhausted its through legal channels, and he still just kind of went around them and kept doing it. You know, like.
But if they are able to falsify, I mean, do you really think this guy was hiring some high-power lawyer to really just,
No, I think
knew all the ins and outs? He cut every corner possible, right?
Yeah, I don't think it was.
They were all scam artists.
Yeah, I think that he just, they looked, they needed documentation, and he would just forge them and kind of forge ahead in terms of.
But that's my point. If you're a company that does $50 billion in sales, I think you have the resources to go after something like this and shut them down, not even for your sake, but for the sake of all those individuals who thought they were buying your customers and got ripped off, and as a result, will really think twice about ever buying your products again.
Yeah.
And it's not even your fault, except that you could have done more to shut them down from the start.
So, Anna, is the issue that Cisco just should have sent their fixer to Mr. Aksoy's residence?
I don't know that I would blame Cisco so harshly on this. I think that we're going to see more of this stuff crop up as marketplacification is starting to like move into the B2B market. We've had Amazon for a very long time on the consumer side, but there are more platforms and solutions opening up along the industrial supply chain that are offering these types of selling opportunities to business entities. And in a way, trying to compete with Amazon's business vertical, which is called Amazon Business. But I don't know. I think the challenge with a marketplace like Amazon or eBay is that someone needs to be in charge of validating the authenticity of the products that are featured. And the bigger those marketplaces get, the harder it is to do. We don't know if maybe Cisco is dealing with 15 of these sellers every single day. Like we have no idea in terms of their universe how prevalent this problem is and how widespread it is. A 2021 report in Fast Company says that Amazon blocked 10 billion attempted counterfeit listings in 2020, which was up from 6 billion the year before. That's how quickly this is growing. And they destroyed 2 million fake goods in their warehouses.
And doesn't that just feel like a drop in the bucket?
It is, because if you think about it, Amazon ships, whatever volume of product from their own warehouses, but a lot of it is just sent from third parties. Amazon never touches that product. They would never even have access to destroy it, right? And researchers who study this, the counterfeiting, they estimate that nearly $1 trillion worth of fake goods flood the global economy. They say that a lot of fake goods on Amazon these days are not what you would expect, like the designer handbags that you see for sale in the streets of New York City.
Yeah.
Like that game is totally different. Like Dove soap, Similac formula, Hydro Flask bottles made with cheaper materials that are not up to spec. Sometimes the materials are dangerous. And even though Amazon has incorporated so many more techniques to try to ferret out these counterfeiters and bring them down, it's still so easy to do. And a lot of times when these sellers get caught, they just pop up somewhere else. It's just so easy to just resurface in a different storefront. So,
or just have 15 or, probably even hundreds at the same time.
Exactly. And so unfortunately, it does often fall on the legitimate branded sellers to watch for this and report it when it's happening. I think Cisco maybe did the best that they could here, but It's not like they can physically take these products off Amazon. Amazon needs to do that, right? Cisco can't do that. And so they need either a lawyer to get involved and figure it out. And obviously, whatever tactic, it took a long time to work. But you would think in the age of like digital tracking and codes and stuff that there would be a better way, and that Border Patrol is not being stymied by fake documents. You know, that part was like really hard for me to understand.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's hard because the problem is just growing as the volume of business grows, and it's become very easy for these sellers to exist. And unfortunately for Cisco, they do experience lost business, probably some brand damage from what you said. Like people think they could have done a better job, but I think most of it is going to come from people who don't know that they bought counterfeit products, being like, my Cisco product sucks, like it didn't work or it broke or left me high and dry in the field. It's not like anyone is contacting them to say you bought a counterfeit product. We've all bought counterfeit products many times over, I'm sure. We just never know.
I mean, sometimes you buy those like really cheap charger cords on Amazon and you know what you're getting for $2.99.
Sure. But you don't always know what you're getting.
True.
I think what got me here is the 7 different letters that were sent to this guy. And it just feels like when there's that repeat dynamic, I understand there's always going to be this ongoing battle here, okay, with this new e-commerce dynamic that's in place and how people just embrace that for all areas of their life, whether it's personal or professional. 7 times. There was so many red flags on this one. I think that's what got me. Also doing a lot of that stuff in cybersecurity coverage that I'm doing now. Again, when you look at all these network components, there's so many other variables to think about. Just for it to not work should be the least of your concerns. Yeah. And for this to fall through, I don't know. I think it was just the repeat dynamic that just really got me.
But like, what would you suggest Cisco then do?
If you're sending a letter to somebody 7 times in the course of 8 years, like that should be some sort of red flag to maybe go check the guy out and say, if you're doing $100 million in sales of our stuff over the course of this time, and we've caught you 7 times doing something you shouldn't have.
You're sending like a muscle to their door?
I think there is plenty of legal intimidation that could have taken place here. Yes.
I don't know. I think, where what I read into this was it seemed like Cisco was exhausting itself through legal channels and kind of just kept running into barriers. I
didn't get that. I think they took the path of least resistance. This is what we always do. We send them a letter. We tell them to stop. Usually that works. If it doesn't, we'll send them another letter.
Yeah.
That's what it felt like to me.
Okay. Well, I mean, these types of stories also remind me, because we're talking about government agencies and militaries, it also makes me really think of how easy sometimes it is and shouldn't be to get these like military procurement contracts. It kind of makes me think of the movie War Dogs, where it's just like all this money standing out there and looking for someone to come in as the lowest bidder. Pro network entities, I just want to reiterate, generated more than $100 million in revenue, and Aksoy received millions of dollars for his personal gain. Customers included hospitals, schools, government agencies, like we said, and the military. So, I mean, really, when it comes to government agencies and the military, like hospitals, that's one where a network can go down and be devastating. Also, his alias, I don't know if you guys caught this, his alias was Dave Durden, which just reinforces how you should never trust a Dave. Davids, stand-up people. Daves, don't trust them. Not for a second. Especially if his alias is the last name of the character from Fight Club. Red flag. Anyway, maybe we'll be able to, as this story develops or there are more legal proceedings, maybe we'll get a little bit more context in terms of Cisco's efforts. That would certainly be enlightening. All right. Before we move on to, in case you missed it, the stories that weren't as popular on the website but still stand a big impact on the industry going forward, we have another word from our sponsor, Big Commerce. And we're back. Big Commerce provides modern e-commerce technology that works with your existing systems. ERP, OMS, CRM, no problem. Whatever existing business tools and technologies you use today, BigCommerce can integrate using pre-built one-click integrations or customize your automation with its APIs. Make the move to BigCommerce today, right now. Do it. Okay, thank you. Now on to In Case You Missed It. Jeff, the stories not as popular on the website, but still stand to make a big impact on the industry going forward. Where'd you go this week for In Case You Missed It?
So I picked two stories. They kind of have the same theme. Okay. So the first one was Bluebird celebrating the grand opening of an electric vehicle production center. So they're a maker of school buses, as you guys probably know, and they recently announced the grand opening of their electric vehicle build-up center on the grounds of the company's main U.S. manufacturing plant in Georgia. So they took a 40,000 square foot facility, and they basically transitioned it from making just traditional gasoline-powered buses to EVs. So right now they've got capacity for 4 to 20 vehicles a day. They hope over time to ramp that up to as many as 110. These are vehicles, these school buses, have a range of about 110 miles. So I thought that was pretty impressive. The other one that I picked along a similar vein was Schneider. The big trucking company. They announced the completion of an electric charging depot at its South El Monte Intermodal Operations Center in Southern California. The depot will power electric battery truck fleet, which has about 100 what they call their e-Cascadias by the end of the year. This thing is huge. It is enough to charge up to 32 trucks at the same time, and they can receive up to 80% of charge within 90 minutes. Each one of these semis has a range of about 220 miles. So what we're seeing is the use of electric vehicle technology channeled in two areas that makes all the sense in the world. And whenever we talk about the thing that leads to the thing, again, we're looking at something where range can be very easily managed. Okay, we're talking about, I don't know too many school bus routes that are 110 miles. I know we get into some rural areas, but I think that's pretty manageable to complete that on a charge and still have time to recharge the bus. And obviously you're cutting a ton of cost out, which is a huge concern right now. Anybody who's got kids taking buses, they can't find enough drivers because they can't pay the drivers, all of those things. So solves a problem. Again, when you look at Schneider here in terms of making deliveries, and they're focused primarily like in the Los Angeles area with this particular fleet, again, 230 miles, you're going to know. You can plan out logistically how well you can apply this technology. The fact that they can charge that many trucks, 32 trucks on this huge, huge charging pad is also pretty amazing. And you could see how this can relate then. If we can get this fired up, we can figure out how to make more of these hubs, make more school buses, implement them that way. There's also a lot of things that they're doing at that Bluebird facility to cut costs so that these buses aren't exponentially more expensive, so that it's more school districts that can afford them as a replacement. They also talk a little bit of refurbishment activities that can also take place in terms of taking basically the same frame and infrastructure for a bus, but instead of putting in a gas engine, putting in an electric vehicle, putting in a battery. So a lot of cool stuff going on. Again, things that lead to the things, solving real world concerns, cutting emissions, lower fossil fuel costs, lower operating costs, and sort of in the same vein. So I thought these were kind of cool stories that easy to brush over, but really could have bigger impacts on a lot of things moving forward.
Still need that sound effect pad. Whip, whip, whip. He did it. No, I can't tell what's more impressive. The fact that this charging site is half the size of a football field, or to imagine 32 of these trucks lined up simultaneously charging. What
a great visual when you've got people who are still very reticent to go after EVs to show a picture of 32 semis plugged in, getting charged up, ready to do what we need them to do.
Just a note from producer Alex, who's on the road right now. Drive safe, but he says the podcast looks and sounds great from the car. That's great. Hope the windows are down. In the command center, producer Eric, who's locking it down on his own, says, it's getting warm in here. It's toasty. It's toasty. Like the wet blanket's not sounding so bad now. Anna, again, these are incredible investments that these companies are making. And like Jeff said, do stand to make a big impact on the industry going forward. Yeah,
they said that the fleet, when fully operational, the fleet would take the equivalent of 2,400 gas-powered cars from the road. Like the equivalent in terms of emissions. That's pretty exciting.
Is that the bus?
No, this is Schneider.
Oh, okay.
Do you know if this is a solar array where they're charging these? Like, do they have panels out? They said it's zero emissions. I'm just curious.
I say we trust them. They say zero emissions.
No one has ever lied about that before.
Yeah, no, it is. I'm sure it's a combination of solar and wind.
And cap and trade. No, I would be curious to know if it is wind or solar or what, but but for fleets, I mean, it makes so much sense to do something like that on site. And if you're out in the desert, what a better place to do. That's why I just assumed. But yeah. But yeah, super cool. Very cool. I agree. You got to see this stuff in action before I think people understand, like, oh, this is a reality that we can be exploring this right now.
All right. Well, in case you missed it this week, we had the second episode of the Gen Z in manufacturing, and it was really close to hitting the top 5, but it didn't. So I wanted to make sure to shed a little bit of light on it. The second episode of Gen Z in manufacturing was about interacting with older generations. In this second episode, Nolan Beilstein interviews Savan Bignon, a 23-year-old process improvement specialist at D'Angelo Marine Exhaust in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. As he studied management and business law at the University of Miami, manufacturing wasn't even on his radar. It was actually a college mentor that told him about D'Angelo, which was looking to build a culture that used process improvement strategies. Now he spends most of his time on the production floor at the Marine Metals Fabricator, trying to increase capacity and streamline the company's processes. According to Bignon, the majority of D'Angelo's employees are 40 to 60 years old. A few of them are under 30. Now, he was interested in the job because it was an opportunity to help change company culture. The company was lacking in data and standardized processes, and most decisions made were all based on opinions rather than facts. Which, I mean, with a lot of tribal knowledge, I still trust those opinions, but I understand, want to wrap a little data around that. D'Angelo operates in a custom field where every exhaust is different, and Bignon says the older generation was resistant to change while the younger workers wanted to work smarter, not harder. See, I thought it was just a saying. Still, both generations work well together, and while the marine industry in general is technologically behind, D'Angelo recently bought, for example, a cobot welding robot that older workers initially pushed back on until they saw the benefit. D'Angelo actually has problems finding younger fabricators. The older workers are actually eager to train these younger workers and help them succeed, but they just can't get them in the door. Bignon actually said a couple of interesting things. One in particular that stood out was how welding and fabricating is a dying trade and almost, a work of art. It's a trade that can't be automated out entirely, and the industry needs to do a better job of showing that manufacturing is a good career for younger generations, using himself as an example. Bignon also stressed the importance of younger workers learning from older co-workers as they build their careers. Jeff, I don't know if you had an opportunity to watch the second episode of Gen Z in manufacturing, but I thought it showed a really good example of how this individual with skills critical to the manufacturing industry could almost make it through graduation without manufacturing ever being on his radar, and then it being a perfect fit for him.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool he found his home. I had a chance to listen to it. Yeah, it's just been kind of a crazy week, as you guys know. But a lot of interesting points, especially when they talk about not being able to get some of those younger workers onto the plant floor. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that is universally understood. I think a lot of it goes back to we need to get into the schools at a younger age and really start talking to kids about the viability of the skills trades and understanding, it's great to want to go into law enforcement or anything else, but this is just as viable. And the contributions that are made on a social level are so huge in terms of making sure supply chain is going. They're not just building marine equipment here, they're also employing a lot of people, and everybody up and downstream of that supply chain is reliant on the work that they're doing. So helping people understand it's not just going in and punching a clock and working in a dirty factory. No, you're working with robotics, you're working with advanced technology, and you're playing this just crucial role in terms of our social being. And that's really what manufacturing is. As far as the welding stuff, that's really interesting to see how there was a drop in the need for welders because of a lot of automation that was taking place. I think a lot of those people that had those skills either retired or didn't continue to develop those skills, and now we do have this huge gap. And if you've ever tried to weld, It is without a doubt one of the most difficult things to do well.
No, and I think that's part of it for me, because I go back to high school where, I took woods and not metals, because metals seemed, first of all, way out of my depth. And, it was like in a, not the most state-of-the-art facility, right? Mm-hmm. But I think if you do a better job of angling welding and fabricating as something that is kind of tech forward, especially when you can use cobots and a little bit more of the robotics there, and as not just a trade skill, but also an art, maybe you could appeal to a younger generation I guess there's a little conflicting thought there that they want to work smarter, not harder. It doesn't seem like they'd be naturally drawn to welding, but maybe there's an inroad there.
There is, and then I think, not to mention, if you talked about getting into the schools earlier. I have a relative who just graduated high school just this past May and took welder training during his senior year, and he's walking out of high school with a job.
Oh yeah,
ready to go.
Paying job.
Good
too.
paying job.
Welders are getting paid.
Exactly. So, I think part of it is showing yes, that there's a creative component to this job, but also it's doable for you. And if you don't want to go to college, you don't have to go to college to get a good job. You should, explore some of these other areas. So I don't know. I really like this this program. I think it's really effective. From my perspective, I think people get locked into this kind of generational divide where we're all trying to understand each other. And when you read coverage about the younger workers, it's a lot of what they're looking for and what their demands are. And then almost you get this perception that these young people I feel like they're perceived as just complaining.
Yeah.
And I don't think that that's true. I think that things like these, where you get a chance to see a person just speak to an industry and provide some really very concrete, great ideas, their perspective on what they're doing and why. I think it kind of breaks that myth apart that this younger generation just wants what they want and they're not, they're unyielding or whatever. I think that that's not a fair characterization, and I'm glad that these episodes kind of show that that's not true.
Well, and I think this breaks down another one too about how older coworkers don't want to work with younger workers, where he actually, went into a setting and maybe didn't know what to expect, and then found all of the older coworkers, or at least, many of the older coworkers, ready and willing to help everybody and train. And and we saw it with a few comments on the site where it's just you get people in there that want to fix the process and they're not willing to talk to people. It's no, that's just you anecdotally make an opinion based on the headline and not actually watching the episode. So I do think that that can go both ways, Anna, where younger workers need to be more open to understanding that they can learn from the older workers in any position. So
I think we need to redefine that smarter, not harder type of terminology too.
Yeah.
Because I've never experienced it personally where a younger worker didn't want to put in the time or was afraid of the difficulty of the work. I think where it gets bogged down is, why do we do it this way?
Exactly.
The process behind it. Let's be smarter in the way we do it, because the answer is saying, well, this is the way we've always done it.
Yeah.
Well, that should never have flown, but now it really doesn't.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and you get that immediate blowback when you're just this is how we've always done it. It's well, I'm going to need more than that. Anna, what is your in case you missed it this week?
So I picked a story this week about the world's most remote robot. This is a story that was sent to us, a press release sent to us by ABB Robotics about a project that they have undertaken in the Amazon. So ABB Robotics is supporting a group called Jungle Keepers and their mission to protect 55,000 acres of Amazon rainforest and reverse deforestation. They're calling it a first-of-its-kind demonstration, and it's utilizing ABB's cobot called Yumi, who is automating planting tasks in what's basically a jungle laboratory, speeding the process and allowing Jungle Keepers volunteers to focus their valuable time and resources on more impactful work. So the same kind of payback that we're seeing in a factory setting, for example, where somebody can walk away from a manual task and do something that's more value added. So in this jungle lab, which is located in a very remote region of the Peruvian Amazon, Yumi has been installed to automate the seed planting process. So usually that's entirely manual, but in this case, the cobot is digging a hole in the soil, dropping the seed in, compacting the soil on top, and then the robot marks it with a color-coded tag to show that it's been done. Yumi is enabling jungle keepers to replant an area the size of 2 soccer fields every day in zones that are requiring reforestation. I don't think I have to go too far deeply into this one as to why I think this is an incredible story, right? I mean, it's a great example of how automation can be put to work in order to address a global problem, not just a situational one in a workplace, for example. It's great when they can solve business inefficiencies, of course, but in this case, Jungle Keepers is saying that without automation, conservation in this area would be at a standstill. And it's actually creating a fully remote and autonomous cobot installation that also overcomes the difficulty of finding people who are willing to stay and work in this distant jungle location, which has been a big challenge for them. So in this pilot, ABB is utilizing what they call their Robot Studio cloud technology, and it enables the teams all across the world to collaborate in real time. So anything that needs to be done in terms of updates and reprogramming and all that stuff, that can all be done remotely. And so to see the difference that they can make in a very important way is just pretty exciting to see. So,
I mean, Jeff, with this kind of technology, the understanding has to be that a Johnny Appleseed reboot is definitely in demand right now.
Yumi Appleseed.
Yumi Appleseed.
Yeah, it just wouldn't be a person. It's a robot.
Yumi Appleseed. I think we just wrote it. We just created our first Today in Manufacturing podcast children's book in partnership with ABB. No, Jeff, whenever I see examples of technology being used like this, I guess it kind of blows my mind because we see it used in agriculture. But like when I see it in agriculture, I have this understanding that it's like still kind of like on the grid, for lack of a better term, where like when you have a cobot planting in a jungle and it can be, you were saying that it can be like remote accessed, right, for updates. I mean, that's pretty incredible.
No, it was a great story. Really cool to see this stuff put to such a practical application. We also ran a story this week about Boston Robotics, and they've still got their dog going and doing all the crazy stuff, which is cool when you understand where they're going with it. But to see just the practical application is what I always gravitate towards too. And no, great story.
Anna, you blew Jessie's mind. She just simply says, "Wow."
I know.
You're right, Jessie. Wow. No, that was this completely fell off my radar. I didn't see this one at all. So thanks for bringing that up. It is an impressive video as well. If you get a chance to check it out on the website. Well, before we get out of here, let's do our final thoughts and then a little bit of trivia. Anna, what is your final thought this week?
All right, so just a quick update on my camping trip, which I know that everyone is on pins and needles to know how that went. We are not equipped as a family to sleep in a tent.
It's just not going to happen.
I don't think.
Camping's not in the cards.
It rained again. We somehow broke the drought just, I think, by our presence being there and got super rained on and wet and stuff. But it was a fun weekend anyway. I need like a tent and then another tent on top of that tent.
Yeah.
And then another tent on that.
You like need to set up a tent in an RV.
I think so. In a hotel.
Yeah.
Those are the best kind.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, it doesn't have to be an RV. Maybe just like a pull behind camper. I don't think maybe not a pop-up camper because those are honestly.
Those are like tents anyway,
those are worse than
right?
tents, in terms of being riddled with holes. But I mean, you guys stayed longer this time, right?
We did. We made it about 36 hours, and it was really fun. And then it started storming, and my oldest daughter started crying, and we were all very wet. And so we're like, you know what? Let's just pack up.
You can tell it's a good family vacation when you know the exact hours you're doing.
Oh, I know. Yes.
Like we had 36 hours of fun. We can call it, and it's still a win.
Yep, it was a win. It was totally a win.
Jeff, what's your final thought this week?
So kind of interesting. Told you guys a couple of weeks ago, my second daughter graduated from school, and she does these cool like photo boards, like getting ready for her party and stuff like that. So looking at all these and looking at the progression, and she picked out a lot of pictures with her and her sisters. So it kind of takes you through these different stages, in life that they were in, and it was thinking about all of the little battles, and then looking longer term, bigger picture, and sort of juxtaposing those against each other, because I tend to be, all right, I'm not getting too fired up about this thing happening right now because bigger picture, this is where we need to go. So I don't sweat the small stuff as much.
Yeah.
My wife counterbalances me pretty well there because she gets into that stuff right away,
Into
which
the
is
weeds.
good. Like,
Yeah.
it works in concert.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because it's sort of juxtaposed against a book I'm reading called Double Cross. It's the true story of the D-Day spies. And basically it's for those who are familiar, it's a Ben McIntyre book. He's written a lot of these types of stories around World War II, dealing with British espionage and stuff like that. And the thing that got me sort of seeing the parallel is there was this one spy and she had a dog and she needed this dog to go with her. And her handlers basically said, we can't smuggle this dog in to follow you wherever you need to go. And because of this, she turned. So you basically see, again, little thing, big thing, depending on your perspective. And it was interesting to see how if they could have just, handled the dog situation, maybe it would have been different there. But also, again, keeping both of those dynamics in play, as a parent anyway, and addressing both the short term and the big picture. Obviously, we got her through school. She's going to college, so everything worked out there. But when you don't, it can backfire too.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting.
I mean, I hope spies nowadays have like a thicker skin.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Doubt it.
There's a lot more involved. Read the book; it's pretty good. But this was just like this female spy's like turning point. She's like, they wouldn't even bring me my dog. The heck with you guys.
I'm turning.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Also, the T-shirts are in. We're getting them out.
Oh, right. And koozies.
David.
What?
Just come on.
Koozies.
I thought I was spoiling it
You
for this
spoiled
episode.
it like 3 times
But
now.
It's too late. It's too late.
I mean, what
Way to wreck it
koozies?
all.
What koozies? My final thought this week is that koozies aren't coming.
But they are.
But no, we've been transitioning as part of a move, and I just wanted to thank my wife for pretty much doing everything, and then also dealing with me. So she's like really been doing like a lot of heavy lifting. But no, we had both of our families over on Saturday. Nothing like moving in a mid-June Wisconsin summer. That was hot. It was really hot. A lot of, the new home still smells like the odor of a large family.
At least all of the smoke kept the sun kind of at bay. At least on Saturday, it was kind of overcast thanks to all the forest fires up in Canada.
Yeah. Positive spin.
Still hot.
But no, it's last time removed, it was maybe 12 years ago. And, 12 years and 2 kids later, it is amazing how much more stuff we have now.
Oh, man.
Like,
Yeah.
we moved ourselves into the old house, just the 2 of us with 1 U-Haul. And, man, it took a team of 15 of us with 3 trailers.
I cannot believe you didn't hire movers.
No. Well,
Best money I ever spent, without a doubt.
I mean, it was a great experience. Everyone, I just can't thank everybody enough. It was like, it was actually like kind of a nice day with the family, all kind of breaking their backs for you. But also, we're not moving the pond. So anyone out there that has a koi pond or is in the market for goldfish in the U.S. region, let me know and we'll ship them out. We'll figure out the logistics. Well, as we had mentioned last week, trivia is back, and I wanted to say congratulations to Larry, who got it right. Enjoy those new thresholds, Larry.
Nice.
The question was, of these manufacturers, who is currently supplying engines for the F1 grid? Mercedes, Ford, Renault, Toyota, Maserati, and Ferrari. And Larry was the first one to get it right with Ferrari, Mercedes, and Renault. Now, for this week's question, I just want to say that we had a lot of people answer right away, but Larry didn't get it right until I think like Monday night. So whenever you're listening to this, if you think that you don't have a shot at winning the new shoes from Cat, you might still. So just reach out. And just a reminder that so Cat, as you know, is the biggest heavy equipment brand. Cat Footwear harnesses the power of these earth movers to break new ground and create a community of doers. These are builders, creators, and problem solvers, workers around the U.S., probably around the globe. This week's winner is going to receive a pair of Cat Footwear Invaders, the work shoes, or Thresholds like Larry, or Second Shift work boots. The Threshold is a work boot as well. So, again, it's winner's choice, but you have to be the first one to email me the right answer. All right, this week, the trivia is another Nolan Beilstein special. The question, or I guess the prompt, is match the shoe manufacturer with the movie character that sports the product on screen. And at first I was like, this seems like a stretch, but I get it because we're giving away shoes. So, match the shoe manufacturer with the movie character that sports the product on the screen. The characters are Forrest Gump in Forrest Gump, Jeff Spicoli in Fast Times at Ridgemount High, and Ellen Ripley in Aliens, arguably the toughest woman in cinema history. The shoes are Reebok, Nike, and Vans. So, match the character with the shoes. First one to get it right in my email wins a new pair of cat footwear. You guys have anything else before we get out of here?
I've said it all.
You said it all.
I'm just trying to think of what the right answer is.
It's like...
I got it.
You got it?
I got it.
Oh, man, everyone's got it already. Let me check my email. I'm excited. All right. Well, before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help out the podcast a lot by leaving a positive review on whatever platform you use. Everyone on YouTube now, if you could just give us a thumbs up, that'd really help us out a lot. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. And subscribe to us on YouTube at IEN Magazine so you get an alert whenever we go live every Thursday. All right, for Jeff Ranke and Anna Wells, I'm David Manti. This is the Today in Manufacturing podcast, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Today in Manufacturing podcast.